Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
Americans who are against the Biden student loan forgiveness. Why? I only disagree with it because it doesn't address the fundamental problem with these loans, which is the predatory interest rates that make them damn near impossible to pay off. The government should be regulating those rates so students aren't being gouged and can actually pay the loans off with reasonable interest. Edit. Just want to clarify, I'm pro-loan relief. I just wish more was being done to address the core issue with these loans. But I would rather the government do something instead of continuing to do nothing. It also doesn't address college costs. The cost of higher education has far outpaced inflation for decades. This is especially problematic for public universities. Tie cost increases to inflation. It's kind of an endless cycle. If the government is going to fully back student loans, then universities have no incentive to lower costs. They know kids will have to take out loans to pay, and that amount will always be okayed. I'm against it as a solution, because schools will still charge $100,000 per year and lenders will still keep making ridiculous loans. Yep, the debt is a symptom. The problem is the extremely large expense that has scaled far more than the rate of inflation. Fix the problem, not the symptom. Just because we don't know how to cure cancer doesn't mean we stop treating it. Band-aid solution, while better than nothing, does not solve any of the root causes of the crisis, which is the unchecked guaranteed loaning practice paired with sizable interest rates. It is worth noting that the forgiveness was coupled with a change to income-driven repayment plans. Basically, they're now capped at 5% of discretionary income. Less of your total income is considered discretionary income. The difference between your monthly payment and accrued interest is subsidized, so your balance never increases. And your loans are forgiven after 10 years of repayment, not 20. Huge win for people who have loans that are suffocating them. What I'm worried about is if this isn't at some point followed up with addressing ballooning tuition rates at public universities. If colleges take this as a green light to charge more because students are more willing to borrow, because more of it will be forgiven, then we could in theory just end up back where we started. Except now students are resorting to private loans because federal loans won't cover the entire cost of tuition. ETA, IDR details. This is separate from PSLF and was updated at the same time as the 10K forgiveness announcement. Correction. Loans are forgiven after 20 years of IDR, not 10. I was mixing it up with PSLF. The root cause of the crisis is the cost of public universities. The price is set by the market. When the government steps in and helps people to secure financing, it increases demand, which in turn causes prices to rise. This is the same thing that has happened to health insurance in the US. You cannot privatize the profits while nationalizing the costs, or you create a market where inefficiency dominates and prices skyrocket. If the government is going to help pay for something, then the government must also institute market regulation like price controls, which will continue to increase costs, knowing the government will find different ways to make all types of payments toward it, whether it's loans, grants, forgiveness, or financial aid. I don't disagree with it per se, but without setting up systems to keep school costs in check, we will get this crisis to reoccur every few years as college costs keep skyrocketing. Before federal student loans were guaranteed, college was nowhere near this expensive. Yes, very much a treatment of the symptom, not the cause. Good point. Edit. For what it's worth, and so I don't have to respond to a ton of people. I was simply agreeing with the fact that it isn't treating the underlying issue. I'm absolutely in favor of loan forgiveness, however. Loan forgiveness doesn't make sense unless you also stop giving out the loans. Universities were able to increase their tuitions so much because everyone was getting guaranteed student loans. And now you're putting down precedent that the loans can be forgiven. Does that sound wise to you? I think cutting the interest to 1% makes more sense. And stop the damn schools from instituting ridiculous tuition increases. My state school was $3,000 per semester when I went there. Adjusted for inflation, that should be $5,500 now. For some unfathomable reason, it's $18,000 per semester now. Students are getting hosed. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The executive branch doesn't have the authority to unilaterally spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a student loan bailout. Putting aside if this is good policy or not, this needs to go through Congress. Former Speaker Pelosi was correct. President doesn't have this authority. Using an obscure 2003 law designed to forgive student loans for military service members whose education was disrupted during Iraq War to blanket bail out millions of student loans is a clear overstep. Furthermore, the law required there be an ongoing emergency for jurisdiction. DOJ already claimed during immigration proceedings that pandemic phase was over. Joe Biden has already gone on national TV and said pandemic was over. Can't claim we are and are not currently in an ongoing emergency to justify activating an obscure Law orders of magnitude beyond its intended scope. The bailouts aren't paid for. It's just going to add hundreds of billions to national debt. A debt that our children will eventually have to pay off. Why should my 2-year-old daughter and 11-day-old son be responsible for paying off your poor economic decisions to get a low-yield degree on an unmarketable field? The bailouts do nothing to address the underlying cause of tuition inflation. With opening the box of bailing out student loan debt as a new potential mechanic in play, tuitions would likely be raised further as we are disincentivizing going into debt, as there's this looming possibility of a bailout coming, and once something happens once, maybe again. It's a wealth transfer mechanic from working people to benefit upper middle class. Why should a car mechanic be responsible for paying down or take on a portion of national debt for a nurse practitioner who is in a position to pay back the debt? It's just robbing from the poorer to give to the richer. There are already laws in place to discharge student loan debts from fraudulent colleges and universities. During these talks, we hear people cite cases like ITT Tech and other predatory colleges lying about their stats and accreditation to get student enrollment. It's a blatant mistruth. Students who attended these colleges are already eligible for discharging their student loans as the colleges committed fraud. What we are discussing here are people who got degrees which may not be marketable, but nobody hid that information from them or lied to them. I got a bachelor's degree in psych. That wasn't a great decision, but also nobody else is responsible for that decision but me. If we are going to start bailing people out for making bad financial decisions, when do I get my bailout check for buying $500 of GameStop stock? Being an adult means that you have the freedom to make your own life's decisions, but you are also responsible for the consequences of those decisions. Edit. Came home to 63 notifications and one person reporting my comment for self-harm. Can we please just be mature enough to not report people for mental health resources just because that person disagreed with you? Are we really that fragile? I mostly agree with student loan forgiveness. But this is a very well described counter, and it's made me at least willing to rethink and re-examine my position. Thanks for this. Thanks for being open-minded and being receptive to new facts and positions. That's a rarity these days, as everyone's position seems to becoming increasingly more solidified. You made a lot of good points, but number 4 is factually incorrect. Per here, https taxfoundation.org/publications/latest-federal-income-tax-data/. The bottom 50% of earners pay only 2.3% of federal individual income tax. I think you can improve your point simply by saying that vocational programs are mostly left out of the deal. I think the point is that it's a big handout to the college educated and leaves out those who couldn't afford college in the first place, just widening their wealth gap. Aren't points 1 and 2 commonly used for corporations though? Banks were bailed out, and the situation was 100% their fault to begin with. Why should I have to pay for them? At least paying off student debt is paying off a debt for people who were trying to better themselves. Corporate bailouts serve nobody but those at the very, very top. Yes. And people were absolutely livid about the bank bailouts also. Why should we change our stance on immoral bailouts this time around? Greater than aren't points 1 and 2 commonly used for corporations though? Banks were bailed out, and the situation was 100% their fault to begin with. When the banks were bailed out, it was constitutional. Congress passed a law, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP. The president signed it. Perfectly constitutional. This student loan relief isn't constitutional. Congress didn't pass any laws. Biden just said, give some money to students, and signed an order. That's completely different, legally speaking. In addition, as you, simping for Jesus said, the 2008 bailouts weren't really bailouts in the same way. They were loans. The government actually made money in the process. They charged the companies interest, and took stock from the companies in exchange for giving them cash in the middle of the crisis. Unfortunately, the issue got way oversimplified and most people just heard, they bailed out the banks, with no nuance.